problem. You know, all these programs, the surveillance programs, are being approved by the Senate, presidents, you know, courts. Don't you think that it is too much for one person to make a decision like yourself? Don't you see any danger in that?
It's a great question. And this is one that's sort of asked again and again in the United States is, who are you to speak up, right? You have all these senior officials, these career-long politicians who saw this or knew about this and said nothing. So surely these programs are right because these people have experience, right? It's presumed that they have judgment that any one person does not. But if this were the case, why is it then that the courts did not side with the government when this information was revealed, but rather they sided with me? They didn't say these programs were legal, that the government was correct, that they should continue. They said that they were illegal, that the government's decisions were wrong. And this ultimately brings us down to the fundamental question. Is the legality of a thing equal to the morality of a thing? And I would argue that it's not. When we look at every injustice going back through history, particularly some of the most long-lasting and impactful, when we're talking about institutions like slavery, when we're talking about aggressive wars, when we're talking about genocides, societal, civilizational level conflicts, these things were more frequently, more often than not, entirely legal. At the same time, they were comprehensively moral. And this is a problem that we need to remember. The people with the most stake in our institutions, these high politicians, these top judges, begin to identify more with their institutions, with their structures of government, than they do with the public, than they do with the people. And they begin to think only about the law and not what the morality of a thing is, right? It's not a question of can you do something, it's a question of should you do something. It's not a question of are you able as a government to do something, but is it right for you to do something? And it is very, very possible, I don't want to set this aside at all, that I could have been entirely wrong in coming forward, that I could have made a mistake, that I didn't understand what I was doing. And it is precisely for this reason that I created a system, a model of working with the journalists to minimize the risks if I were wrong, to reduce the consequences, the harm that would result if I was entirely mistaken. And very briefly, because I know we've talked quite a bit about this, the model was this. I gathered evidence that I believe showed criminality of wrongdoing by the government. I provided this to journalists. This is important. I have never published a single document about the government's activities. I provided this to journalists, some of the most trusted newspapers in the world, and as a condition of access to this material, I required them to agree to two conditions. One, they publish nothing simply because they thought it was interesting or because it was newsworthy. They only publish stories if they were willing to say, as their newspaper, as their institution, it was in the public interest to know this story, to know this material in each case. And then beyond this, because maybe they get it wrong too, they would go to the government, the very government whose activities they were revealing, before they published the story, and give the government a chance to argue against publication, to give the government a chance to say, this Snowden guy's making it up, these documents aren't real, or he doesn't understand what's going on, or you don't see the big picture here. If you publish this detail, someone will die. And in every case that I'm aware of, the newspapers did this. And this is the reason why now, in 2017, we have seen no one come to harm as a result of these disclosures. Even if you disagree with me, even if you think I'm a terrible person, even if you think I was wrong, you cannot argue with the results. The US government, the very institution that criticizes me, changed their laws in response to these disclosures. And at the same time, now years later, they have never been able to demonstrate any harm that has come as a result of these disclosures. So the question isn't, do you think I'm a good guy? The question isn't, do you think I was right? The question is, would you rather not know the truth of what's going on in your world?